Welcome to our Facebook Live. Sorry for the delay again. We just seem to have more and more technical difficulties all the time, but we're glad that you're joining us today. I'm going to start out by thanking United Way of Utah County for letting us continue these remote workshops. This is our 12th week, and we wish we were face-to-face with you, but we're glad that we can continue to be with you in your homes. And I know that we've been reaching people in different parts of the United States. Some people commented, can I live in another state and participate? Of course you can. We're glad that you can join us and share with us the information and hear your views and your comments. So this is open for everyone. Once again, we will not start any live classes until September. And if we have the green light to go ahead from our agencies, but until then we don't have any interns to help us out with childcare or the setup, so we will be doing these remotely until at least September. We also like to thank PBS Utah and Women United that financially support this program and help us buy the books and the supplies for it. So we're excited to talk about Who is My Child? A Guide to Temperament. But before I start, I wanted to just respond to a couple comments that were posted last week. And one of them, I really was interested in making sure that I talked to you as a group, because I think that a lot of you probably have the same questions, the same concerns about your child. So one parent wanted to know about their child and their tantrums and about some books that she could use. One of my favorite books is called How Are You Peeling? Foods with Moods. Right now we cannot get that through Scholastic, but you could get it at your library or through other sources that sell books. That talks about feelings and how you feel and why you feel. But in the deeper question of a 2-year-old and how they act and react to people in their world, you need to understand that 2-year-olds are typical of having strong reactions. And this is going to happen up to 3, possibly 4. One of the things that was very surprising to me is that children cannot hold more than one emotion at a time. And you'll see children actually playing and laughing, and then something wrong happens and it's a complete meltdown. And that is normal behavior for young children. Also, interesting to note is there's more aggressive behavior in between the ages of 2 and 4 than any other time in a person's life. Now that's a typical child. So if your child is hitting, biting, scratching, kicking, that is normal, not wanted, and we want to help them find other ways to deal with those emotions. But it is normal behavior for children to act aggressively. What our job is to help regulate and help them get other methods and tools so that they don't bite, hit, and kick. So remember that. There's more aggressive acts between the ages of 2 and 4 than any other time in a typical person's life. So one thing that I want to mention is that I always say this almost laughingly, but in seriousness, is that if your child around 2 starts to be no and being very determined and independent, then that means that you have actually been a good parent thus far. And the reason why is that that child trusts his surrounding. They feel secure with you to share their feelings, and so it is very typical that a child that has been raised in a loving, warm environment is all of a sudden going to be telling you, no, I'm going to do it myself. And using some pretty strong words like, I hate you, or go away. And that's because they don't know the other words to use. But it is typical, and yes, we want to help children learn to self-regulate. Last week I could not remember that word, and so I said self-control a couple times, but I want to use the word self-regulate. Our goal is for all of us to regulate our emotions, not just control them, but to know when it's appropriate to act angry, or to be happy, or to be wild and crazy and silly, and also calm. So we want to teach children and to progress to be able to self-regulate. Now what's interesting with a child, and I'm going to use the demonstration from the Circles of Security. This is a training that I've been able to take, but I am not trained to give it. So I only can give you some parts of it without violating their policies, but you can go to their website and gain more information and watch some of their videos that are really good, and I would encourage you to do that. But last week I talked about that, to think of your hands as reaching out and then reaching back. And in this environment, we know that children, we're actually helping them go out into the world and to explore the world and to have experiences and to play. And in this part, we want to support their exploration. We don't want to always tell them, oh, you can't, or that's too dangerous, or stay by me, I want you to hug me. We want to support that. Now, in that support, we want to watch them. That means maybe not be watching your iPad or your iPhone or looking at everything around, but watch them and delight in their exploration. Help them when they need it, and also enjoy it with me. So talk about what they did when they were at the park or what they did when they were outside, and help them enjoy it and let them know that you enjoy being with them. Now, most of the time a child is in that exploration phase, there's going to be times when you need to be a safe haven. And a safe haven means if a child falls or gets really hurt, or maybe something startles him or they become afraid. And so you want to be able to make sure that you are being able to be a safe haven where they can come. And one of the things in this area is, one thing, you're going to protect that child when they need it. You're going to comfort them. Once again, you're going to delight in that child. You're going to make them feel like you are wanting them to come back and that you are glad that they're there. The one that I like best is for when children have tantrums, is you're going to help them organize my feelings. Children at a very young age, when I said that they only can have one feeling, they're having that feeling very, almost explosively. And so you can help them organize that. And some of the ways that you can do that is to empathize and to describe what you think the child is feeling. Oh, you're really sad your friend went home. You really want them to come back and play. And you can use those words and organize those thoughts while you're protecting them. And then you can say, would you like to sit here and watch him as he leaves and goes away and think about when they get to come back? Would you like me to read you a book? Do you want to go play with your blocks? Would you like to color a picture? Or would you like to sit here and be sad for a minute because I can sit here and rub your back? Give them some choices, but that helps them organize their feelings. And then as they get older, they've been able to have that help to organize their feelings, and they won't need as much support. One thing to remember is there's never a time when a person gets off of this circle. We all need to know that people delight into us and that they're encouraging our exploration, whether it's schooling or starting a new job or doing a new hobby, and that there's a secure base when we need that. So the one thing that I love about the Circle of Security, some of their verbiage or some of their things that they help us talk about is always be bigger, which is not hard for most of the times, stronger, and that does not mean physically hurting a child, but stronger in organizing our own emotions and being the strength for that child. Wiser and kinder. There's been so many times in my life as a parent I was bigger and stronger and probably a little bit wiser, but I wasn't very kind. And so I remember taking this training, and that was the word that I need to change in my life as a parent, is to be kinder and not be sarcastic or critical of a child. I was very, used humor sometimes with too much sarcasm that would not be very kind. And whenever possible, follow your child's needs. And that doesn't mean that your child has to be spoiled. It just means that when they are upset, to listen to them. And then whenever necessary, take charge. Again, in our workshop last week, we talked about that stage 2 is that you need to be physically present when your child has out of control feelings. And that doesn't just happen with anger, but all out of control feelings like hunger. We need to be physically there to help them. So just thank you for the questions that you gave last week. I just wanted to respond to those. I hope that that gives you some ideas. So today we're going to talk about temperament, and you can pull up the slides. It's a PDF. There's no videos today, so you don't have to worry about muting us while we're watching videos. And the keyword today is smile. So take a deep breath and smile. It's Tuesday, and we're going to talk about who is my child? Now, I always envisioned when I took this class several years ago and was trained to be a trainer, is that the person that wrote it didn't say, who is my child? It's, who is this kid? And then they just changed it a little bit. But you can put in any person that you might not quite understand, like, who is this guy I married? Or who is this neighbor that I'm going to now be spending the next 30 years by? So there's a lot of people that it doesn't just happen to help us understand our children. This will help you understand yourself and help you understand how to have better relationships in all of your areas of your life. And so I'm really, I'm anxious, I like to study temperament. It was one of the topics that when I was studying it in my undergrad years, I didn't quite understand it. And I would read about it, and it just seemed to me that there was just a very short amount of information in every class that I take. And it would always talk about a good fit. And I'm like, well, how do you get a good fit for a child or an adult? Whose fit is it? Is it the parents or is it the child's? And so I was just looking for something to help me understand temperament a little bit more when I went to a conference and was able to study this and then become a trainer. So I do want you to know that there's lots of other workshops or classes or research or TED Talks or all kinds of things that you can listen to about temperament. The one thing about this one, it was designed by a television station, KERA, and they work with child development specialists to create it. So it's their copyrighted curriculum. We have permission to send you the handouts, which is 42 pages long, and there's a reason for that. It's because there's so much information depending on who your child is and what traits that they have. So you're going to use that for specifically your family. So you're lucky that it is an electronic file that you can use over and over again with multiple children and for yourself. The one thing that I do want you to understand is if you have studied temperament before, taken some classes, the verbiage of some of the things we're going to talk about are going to be different. Some of the temperament traits might not be named what you've taken in other classes. And that it doesn't mean that they're different, it just means they've used different words to describe them. In most areas of temperament, we usually talk about 3 of the traits. Today we're going to talk about 9, and so that's a little different too. But don't think that you can't go to other sources and find the similarities, because they are very similar and they will be helpful as you try to understand temperament a little bit better. Another thing that you want to understand is that this is to help you guide your child. We don't want to label children, and we don't want to make children feel like they fit in one particular box. That's not the purpose of any of our classes, is to make you think that your child can only act or react or think or behave a certain way. That is not the case. I'm going to start out with reading a book that's called 2 Eyes, a Nose, and a Mouth, and it is about physical differences and not temperament differences. 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth are the first things that we see on millions and millions of faces from Tibet to Tennessee. Some eyes are shaped like almonds, others are big and round. And what about those eyebrows? Wow, all kinds can be found. Noses can be short and wide, or turned out, long and bumpy. Some are small and curved up, and some are kind of lumpy. When it comes to mouths, it's plain to see the variety is fine. Some have lips that are full and broad, while others are thin as a line. Isn't it amazing how changing a feature or two makes millions and millions of faces, yet no one looks just like you? Imagine how dull the world would be if everyone looked like you or me. Over and over, we'd see the same face till we'd wish for another to take its place. How lucky we are. The world isn't that way. Our differences make us special, wouldn't you say? And then here's a place that you can put a picture of your family or your child. But I wanted to start out with this book to describe that we all have, two eyes, a nose, and a mouth, but we're all different. And that's the same with temperament. There's only 9 temperament traits, but we all act, react, and behave differently. No matter if we come from the same family, or even if you're a twin, you might act very similar, but it doesn't matter. Our temperaments make us different, and we should acknowledge that and be glad for that, because our differences do make us special. So smile about that. Remember, smile is our word that we're going to talk, that you're going to choose this week. And we're going to talk about what temperament is, how we define it. So temperament is how a person acts, not how they feel, not how they think, but how they react, behave, or act in certain situations. It's made up of 9 different traits that we'll talk about later. This is really important to understand. It's neither good nor bad. Now, some of us have preferences of how people look. Some people love blue eyes, or other people love dark curly hair. And that's just personal views. It doesn't make it good or bad. And that's the same as how we act and react and behave. Although there are some people that don't really like to be around very reactive people that show strong emotions. They might not know how to deal with that. And so we need to remember that temperament is not good nor bad. It has nothing to do with temper, although that word is in there. And it stays pretty strong throughout our lives, but we can learn to adapt or act differently depending on a situation. For example, a child that has been able to have the guidance and the tools to sit still for long points of time, even though they're a very active child, you might see them as a teenager and adult, like tapping their foot, or maybe playing with something. I have a child that always takes a pencil and a drawing book and is always drawing. And that actually helps that child concentrate on what's being said, but it helps her do that. So we can adapt. We're not going to change. And it's interesting because I'm a homebody by nature, but my job requires that I'm out and about and I'm going into other people's homes and I'm doing different things. But if I could find the place that I love the best, it's in my house, but I've adapted and I enjoy my job. I like meeting new people. I wish everybody could come to my house and we could do it at my house, but I've learned to adapt. And so don't think that just because your child has a different trait or a certain trait that they can't adapt or make sure that they still feel safe and comfortable in different situations. Why should we learn about our child's temperament? I'm going to read this quote. Learning your child's temperament will help your child adapt to certain situations throughout his or her life. When your child is very young, it is up to you to make good choices based on your child's temperament. So sometimes, a lot of the times, most of the times, you're going to be looking at what your child needs rather than what you need when they're young. As your child grows, it's your job to help them learn to make good choices based on their temperament. And while it may be a good choice for you and your temperament might not be good for your child. So just because you're a very talkative person and likes to be around a lot of people and likes change all the time does not mean that your child does. Understanding your child's temperament is very important. And I just want to give you an example that a wise, strong person that I met teaching these classes shared with me. That's one of the reasons I like teaching face-to-face, is because I get your feedback and I get to learn from you and I get to make great friendships. But years ago, when I first started teaching this class and very new in it and sort of stumbling, I remember a lady talking when we were talking about this. She talked about having a very large family. I think she had 9 children. I can't remember the exact amount. And she was a very spontaneous person. Her ability to change was instantaneous. Hey, if it's raining, let's forget school and go play in the puddles. Or if it's windy, let's go fly a kite and we'll do the laundry another day. That was one of her temperament traits. And most of her children were a lot like her. And she had one child, and she said that he was one of the middle children. And at first, when his temperament was very different from hers, he liked structure, he liked physical routine. He always was very organized in comparison to her. And at first she would say to him, you belong to the wrong family. You should have gone to, and she would name a family that was more that style. And she said after a while, she realized one day when he was in a younger elementary school, that when she said that, even though it was a joking matter, that she could almost see him feeling like unwanted and defeat. And she said all of a sudden it hit her that she was not making it a safe environment for her child, that she was making him feel like he didn't belong in that family. And she said it really took her down to her knees to realize what she had been doing to this child for so many years. And so she, with humility, went and talked to her son and said, you know what, you're the perfect son for me. You can keep me organized. And she did say this because I thought about somebody like her that signs up for everything. She said, my son could remind me that I had signed up to bring 5 dozen cookies the next day for school, or remind me that I needed to wear something, or it was school picture day. And she said, you know what, without you, where would I be? And you are such a strong strength in our family. And when you look at it that way, wow, what a difference it makes, is that our differences can build each other and that we can help each other. I joke with all my employees, I pick people that are very different from me because they make my job easier. And we are a great fit because we can be a great team because we have different strengths. And that's what I want you to think about your family, is you don't always have to be the same to be a great family. Okay, so why do you need to know about temperament? You can provide activities for your children. And not only for children that might be, like with one of my children, to encourage them to try new activities. It doesn't mean that they'll like them, but you can at least encourage them to try. And you can understand how your child and you are alike or different. And I think one of the best ways is to guide and discipline. All of you know that have more than one child, that when it comes to discipline, you have maybe read a book or found a blog or found something that you're like, this works. And then you get a second or third child and all of a sudden it falls apart and you're like, what happened? Because your child's temperament is different, then you're going to have to create a new way to deal with them. And so for some children, just a strong voice can really upset them. And for other children, they might not even recognize you're mad. And it might take a while for them to get that you're upset with them. So in your handouts, you're actually going to see what kind of discipline, what kind of activities, that just some examples. It's not inclusive of what you can do for your child. This was one that I use probably most often when my children got to school, is working with their teachers and child caregivers. My children had child care providers throughout their life, and I remember my youngest daughter, her grandma, my mother, was able to take care of her, but she liked a couple days a week where she could have a day for herself. And so we found a child care provider, and one of the first ones we went to was not a good fit for us because their policy was once you got to the front door that you couldn't follow your child back into the room and be with them for a little while. It was the door and go. And that did not meet my needs, and it did not meet my daughter's needs. And so that was not a good fit. And I tried to describe to the management, but their policy was working for them. So I was able to find someone else that I could go sit with them and talk to her for a couple minutes. And just, that was very important for us and to be able to do that for her. With my children's school teachers, I was able to help my children and their teachers understand what their temperaments were. And with one of my children who was very, very active as an adult, he's very, very active, had a lot of had a hard time in classes where the rules and what the rules were not very strict. If it was okay one day to put your feet on the desk, but the next day it wasn't, that was difficult for him. And so we needed to find teachers that had a lot of structure. And also I had to work with teachers to say, okay, soccer just got over, we're not going to have basketball for 3 more weeks, so you might need to not have him not sit by his friends, or need to help him find some ways to not be so jittery and not anxious but active. And so another thing is, I would have never taken away my child's sports or physical activities to discipline him, because if he needed that physically to be able to feel good about himself, can you imagine if I would have taken those away as an act of discipline? So you do need to work. And then what environment they need to be in or can help them adapt. A person can't change a child's temperament, but a child can be influenced by others to make choices to behave or react in different ways. And I think that's good to understand. Now, I don't think that I mentioned this far, is that temperament is a genetic or a biological factor. And that's something that the more I've studied it, the more the research has proven that to be true. That children are born with their temperament. Yes, their environment will influence that environment. And you will, yourself may have experienced this, but you will see that a lot of adults, their environment when they got to be in their own apartment or their own place, that their true temperament traits were able to be expressed, because their homes were not unsafe by any means, but it was just something that they never had the opportunity to do when they were younger. And so we want to realize, just like hair color, although it can be altered, it can't be changed. You can't change a child's temperament. It is genetic, it's biological. And some nurses say that children, they can tell what a child's temperament is going to be like two or 3 days in the nursery. But most experts say that by the time a child is 3 is when we can see their true temperament. One of the questions that I get, and I had when I was first studying temperament, is what's the difference between personality and temperament? And I never had a really good answer, and I don't know. One of the things that if you Google it like I do or research it like I have, is there's not a real consensus. But this is the best one that I had, is that temperament is a combination of mental, physical, and emotional traits. It's an inborn natural predisposition. There's not much you can do to change it. For example, someone who is an extrovert or introvert can be his temperament. So, and personality is a distinctive and is acquired. And it's almost on top of temperament, so you'll have your temperament, and then your personality will be formed around your temperament. And so it's your personal identity and is developed over the years. And I think that that's really important to understand, is personality does develop where temperament is pretty set. Personality is determined by your temperament and other factors: education, socialization, culture, experience. Factors that affect one's personality are hereditary, role model, and experience, and especially culture. And so just remember that temperament is pretty well set, where personality is acquired over the years. Okay? So let's move on to who influences your children's temperament. I love this photo, this image. And the behaved? Oh my goodness, yes. Teachers. Once again, my children's teacher, my child that I talked about, if he had a teacher that was very strict, did really well with, even though he's very active. But as he had a teacher that was not very strict, he seemed to be in the principal's office a little bit more. Grandparents, of course, caregivers, other relatives, home. Home is probably one of the best places that we can adapt and to adjust to temperament. And not always that do you need to make your home exactly to fit your child's temperament, but what you need to do is make sure there's a safe place that they can go to meet their temperament. But if your kitchen is noisy and loud and all that going on, that's okay. That will help your child adjust. But they do need a place where they can go if they want that quiet. Parents are definitely the biggest influence on a child's temperament. Some other ones are friends, your bedroom. Think of your bedroom when you were 13 years old. Did it influence your behavior? Was it someplace that was very important to you that you could express who you were? Your toys and activities. I don't know that I was shy. It wasn't until I got in college that I became a little bit more outgoing. But my toys and activities were pretty I liked dolls and Barbies, didn't like to admit it, but I loved them. Loved playing school and teacher. So my activities were not outside playing baseball like my friends. My temperament definitely influenced that. When I would go to a park, I loved the swing and I loved to go as high as I could because I could be with my own self and my thoughts. Your neighborhood, your school, and television. Television definitely influences that. My granddaughter, she came up with a word for herself that she says, I have big emotions. And she does. Even as she's gotten older, her emotions are very apparent. The minute you walk into the door, you know what her strength of expression is. But television and movies really, they impacted her behavior. And one of the things that I did is when we would take her to a movie that had a lot of violence or even a child's movie that someone was getting hurt, she didn't like that. And so I would take her out and her younger brothers would say, why are you scared? And she would just say, it's my emotions, it's the way I feel. And I knew that. And so I'd say, it's okay, we can leave. And because I could watch that movie later, never watch it again. I just wanted to be with them. And so you do need to understand how television and movies influence your children. How do they influence you? I do not like scary movies, and I do not want to watch them. And so we need to understand that. Now, there is one thing that I just think is very, I don't know the word, unique, is that the first 12 years of a child's life, siblings, teachers, grandparents, caregivers, other relatives, homes, and parents have the biggest influence on a child's life. And then as a child becomes about 12, not exactly, but think about when you were 12 and 13, these other things became more important. Do you know anybody that wants to be in their bedroom all the time now and before didn't even want to make their bed? And their friends, I do remember school activities that my children would rather be at school activities or school things than hanging out with me or my husband. And that, you sort of miss your kids. And so, but what is fun to think about and think about in your own self is if you had good relationships or a strong foundation with the people on this side, when we become older, we typically go back to that. That's where we go back. And I do remember in my young adult years wanting to hang out with my friends, wanting to go to the movies, wanting to go to different activities. And then as I became older and married and had my own children, I wanted to be around my siblings. I wanted to be around my grandparents. I wanted to be around my home and my family. So that's just something that I think is interesting that research has shown is the people that have the influence, a positive influence, the first 12 years of a child's life is who they return to. So we're going to talk about the traits. We're not going to spend a lot of times on these, but I am just going to talk about and give you a brief definition. In your handouts, you're going to see different words that define them or describe them. Once again, we don't want to label a child as hyper or as anything that is a negative connotation, but those are just words. And so as you go through your handout, you might start with yourself to see where your temperament traits are, and then move to your children and other people that you have relationships with. Now, one thing is that this workshop, they teach that everyone has all 9 temperament traits, that none of us miss one of them, but it's on a continuum that you either have a very high or a very low or a very neutral. And I used to say that sound or sensitivity to senses within and then sound was one of my highs. And then one day I realized, as I was at a basketball game and everyone was cheering and I was cheering right along with them, that the noise didn't bother me at all. It was when I was trying to drive or concentrate or do something that noise bothered me. And so I realized that noise for me is neutral because it depends on the situation. However, had noise bothered me at the basketball game along with being home, then it would be high on my continuum of either high or low. So in this class, the things that we were taught is that there's usually 4 temperament traits that are very high or very low that start to describe who you are. And the others are neutral. So it just depends on the situation whether you're persistent or not. Maybe in school you're very persistent, but within your bedroom you're not. You can make that a mess all day long. So those are the things that you're going to look for, is what becomes very high or very low, and it's always that way, and it's hard to adapt those situations, will become your temperament and will become that almost foundation for your personality. So we're just going to go through these. I'm going to read a book about one of them. Activity level, that's pretty self-explanatory. Are you moving? Do you not like to move? Would you rather sit and read a book or watch television? Or do you cannot sit through a 2-hour movie out till you're gone? I have a child, like I said, that this is his high. And as he was choosing a career, he used to say he wanted to be a dentist. And I just used to look at him and say, I don't think you could stay in the same room for that long of time. And he's not. He's chosen a career where he's always moving, always going. And his wife even says, especially during this COVID, that he always is going out. He's riding bikes, he's doing things. And it's not that he doesn't like his home, but he is very active. And so he's chosen a career that meets his temperament trait. Then I have a child, my youngest, who has a very low activity level, and we're having to encourage her to go do things and find different things that she does like that's activity level, so that she does not just become completely inactive. This next one is, sometimes people don't quite understand it until I describe it, and then you're like, oh yeah. So in this, and when you think that we have 9 temperament traits and then we have 5 senses, we're adding 5 other traits to this pot that you can mix up. Just because I'm somebody sensitive to sound does not mean that taste or sight would be a low or a high for them. So that you can have in any one of those a high or a low. Can you see how we know that people react and act differently when you try to mix all these up and see where they are? But do you know someone, or have you seen a child that has to touch everything? They go down a hallway and you just see them touching everything. If they're sitting next to a child, they have to touch their hair or they have to touch something. And as I've been able to go in with my job to observe preschool children and to watch preschool teachers or child care teachers, I'll see a child with that temperament trait, and the teacher is always, not always, but a teacher that doesn't understand temperament trait might be always saying, Johnny, don't touch him, Johnny, don't touch him. And then I have said to him, have you ever thought about maybe scooting your children away so they're not so close? And it's amazing how just a little bit of distance can help that child adapt to a situation. Other children's smell is very, very, something that is very high, and it defines them. The scent, most women when they're pregnant, they understand that everything, they walk into a room and they can't stand the smile, so they might have to leave. So sensitivity to senses. Again, if we're trying to make it best fit for our child and we know that loud noises is something that's difficult for them, we want to help them adapt. My two twin-year-old granddaughters that are 2.5, they are very afraid. Sounds are really something that's high on their temperament traits. And the other night we were planting some strawberries together and it started to thunder. And just the look of terror on both of their faces at the exact same time was very interesting to me. And I'm like, oh, I love the sound of thunder. Oh, it's gonna rain. And they're like, no, it scares me, Grandma. And so I said to them, do you want to sit on my lap for a minute? And they're like, no, we want to go in. And so instead, we went up on our deck and we just sat on the deck. And I said, you know what? Thunder's not going to hurt us. But another thunder burst came and it was loud and they snuggled in a little bit. And we sat there for a moment. And then as another one came, they became a little more unfearful, and by the time we walked into the house, they said, thunder's just a noise, it doesn't hurt us. Now, they still wanted to come in, and they still didn't like the loud sound, but they were able to adapt a little bit to it. So you're not going to want to take the kids to the fireworks that hate sounds, or children that gets really, you know, if it's a close crowd at a parade or something like that, when you know that that's not going to help them. This is my highest temperament trait. I am aware of people's emotions. I don't always read them right, but I always want to. I want people to tell me how they're feeling. I notice other people, and I'm always thinking, oh, that person looks sad or that person looks happy. And so this is my highest, and this is probably the lowest for my husband. So we are very opposite. And when I first, we were married, before I took this class and learned about it, I really thought that this trait of his was something bad, and in me it was something good. And I've learned over the years that this trait has its strengths and challenges. For instance, with our blended family of 9 children, a lot of times I'm always so concerned about them and worrying about them. And he can say to me, hey, it's their lives, they're adults, we've raised them well, they're going to work their way through that. Where I can say to him, hey, are you noticing this and this and this about so-and-so? Maybe we need to ask. And he'll go, oh, I didn't notice that. So awareness of people's feelings. It's interesting that in the business world, this is pretty low, but in a school teacher or in a child care center, this would be high on most people's temperament traits. So different businesses seem to gravitate for different temperament traits. Strength of expression. Boy, look at those girls. You know exactly how they're feeling. Have you ever worked with somebody that's opposite? They walk into the room and you have no idea how they're feeling. And once again, I've had supervisors and worked with people that have been both, and they both are sort of, you know, on one hand, it's nice to know what somebody's feeling, but on the other hand, when you know their whole life, it might not always be so fun. And so in this is an area where if a child has a very low on the strength of expression, they might get overlooked a lot, and they might not even get noticed. In fact, in a schoolroom, some of you may have been that child, and you sometimes didn't get remembered a lot because you were just sort of quiet and there. And then on the other hand, the child that's a little bit bossier sometimes gets tagged that or labeled that just because of their strength of expression. And so once again, in your handout, it will give you some activities and things that you can do, whether they're high or low, or depending on what the situation is. Persistence. Persistence is sticking with something and adapting, and even when it seems discouraging, trying over and over again. And so I'm going to read a book that's called The Delivery Bear. It's about somebody that lived up to his dreams and was persistent, even though there was a couple times he thought he wasn't going to make it. Even as a tiny cub, Zogby knew what he wanted to be when he grew up. Now Zogby read the advertisement in the grocery store window. Then he read the notice 2 more times to be sure he hadn't imagined the words. Zogby leaped onto his bike and raced off. His dream was about to come true. But as Zogby's interview, the manager shook her head and said, "I'm sorry," she said. "You just don't have the fluffy tail cookie look." "Oh, please give me a chance," Zogby pleaded. The manager sighed. "Okay, you may have a one-day trial." Zogby packed his bike basket with cookies and headed up to the first stop. After ringing the doorbell, Zogby proudly sang the delivery song at the top of his lungs. "I'm here with the sweets to share. Fluffy cookies baked with care. Every bite a fluffy treat. Will you smile? You will smile while you eat. Please remember when you chew, you are special. You are you." Mrs. Rabbit opened the door smiling, but then, the next delivery will go better, Zogby told himself. "I am here with sweets to share. Fluffy cookies baked with care. Every bite, I guess when customers hear this song, they expect to see a cute bunny," Zogby thought. He stopped to buy bunny ears and then biked up a rocky hill to his next delivery. "I am here with sweets to share. Oh, I need whiskers," Zogby realized. "I am here with, the tail," Zogby remembered. "How have I forgotten the fluffy tail?" At his next delivery, Zogby stood sideways so that the customer could get a good look at his fluffy tail. "I am here, Zogby blinked back tears. The manager was right, he admitted. "I am not cut out for this." Zogby sang softly to himself as he biked back towards the factory. "Please remember when you chew, you are special, you are you." He stopped. "I am special. I am me." Zogby turned around and headed in the opposite direction, making up his own delivery song as he biked. "Hello from your cookie bear, here with the fluffy treats to share. I am big and I am hairy, but I promise I'm not scary. Also, if you're feeling blue, you can have a bear hug too." Slowly, Mrs. Mole opened the door. "My, you are really big," she said, "and it looks like you might need a hug." "That's true," Zogby sniffled. "I could use a hug." While Zogby's new song, the last few deliveries went much more smoothly. "Would you like to come in for a spot of tea and some cookies?" Mrs. Porcupine asked. When Zogby returned to the factory at the end of the day, the manager was waiting. "Your trial is over," he said. "I know," Zogby nodded. "I don't have the right look. Thanks for giving me a chance." "I said your trial is over," the manager repeated. Several customers called to say how much they enjoyed your singing and your bear hugs. "Welcome aboard." Zogby's eyes widened. He pulled the manager into the biggest bear hug of the day. "Does this mean I get an official delivery uniform?" Zogby asked, gently plopping the manager back into her chair. "Absolutely," she said once she caught her breath. Come and grab one. I'll order our first official delivery bear uniform today." So, even though there was a lot of challenges that Zogby had, and even though he thought at the end of the day he wasn't even going to get the job, he was persistent. And so persistence has its challenges as much as it has its strengths. And so when I've talked to people that are very persistent, they said, "I love being persistent because people can count on me. They know I'll get things done. I'm always on time. I'm usually done on time and, before an assignment's due." But they also say that there have been times in their life that maybe they could have done something else or adapted it. So every trait has its strengths and its challenges, but we can learn to adapt. And usually we learn to adapt as we grow and we try new things. The next one is distractibility. And children are distractible, we know that. But as children get older, do they have this self-regulation to sit still? Or are they easily distracted? Once again, this is something that is, I don't know, it's my highest, but it is high. If someone walks into a room, I like to see who it is and what they're doing. If I'm teaching a class, and even when I'm teaching these kind of classes, it's funny because I'll see the person that's texting everyone, and I'm like, "Oh, I wonder what's going on. Is something wrong?" So I do get distracted easily. And once again, this can sort of help me see a big picture and always just instead of focusing on just the little details. Now I want to stop here and talk about this in all temperament traits, but I'm going to just use the example of ADD or ADHD, because if a child has a delay or some kind of something that is going to alter their personality, it almost like it overshadows it. Now, so a child that is so distracted that they can never get things done, that they can never have good relationships, that's when we would need early or intervention at any time. And that's because then that trait takes over the rest of their other temperament traits and their personality. So it's really important to understand that not just with this trait, but even in the sensitivity of senses. If your child cannot eat certain foods because of the texture, and it gets to a point where they're not being able to chew or swallow or have speech delays, then we need to address that, and that's okay. And then when you do address that, you'll see those other temperament traits and other personality traits come out. So you can be distracted and still get things done, but for children that are fussy, what's nice is you usually can actually get them to pay attention to something else or distract them a little bit. Ability to change. Once again, this is something that some children just love new adventures and other children don't like that. They want that same person in their life. They want to go to the same place. I'm using my family members because that's who I always think of when I teach these classes, but my mother, this is her highest temperament trait. She does not like change. She loves to travel, but she likes to get home as quickly as she can. We always joke when she visits family members is, you know, they say they're going to be gone for 2 weeks or 10 days, and it usually ends up to be shorter because she can't wait to get home and be back into her routine. And so as we do that for children that don't like change, you need to give them a lot of advance notice when there is going to be a change and tell them what to expect instead of just springing things on them. The next one is similar, but this is a physical routine. Children in their first 2 to 3 years do need a physical routine because they don't always know what's coming next. When there is a routine in their home, they know what is going to happen and they feel more safe and secure. So even though all children need this, some children need it a little bit more. Some things have to use the same cup or plate. They only can do a certain thing, or at bedtime, I have a granddaughter that has to have 2 books and 2 songs before she can go to sleep. And it does not alter. You don't read 3 books, you only read 2. It's interesting that even all children need a routine. There are some children that need more of that to help them feel safe. This last one, our last temperament trait, once again, in this temperament trait, the people that wrote this curriculum identified 3 different usual moods: happy, serious, or less positive. And whenever I teach this, I think of the Winnie the Pooh characters. I think of the owl for being serious. He's always studying, he knows all the facts, you know, and it's funny because his treehouse or his house could be blowing over and he's still just the serious guy that's telling you what's going to happen next. And then there's Eeyore for the less positive. You know, but we still like Eeyore. We don't try to make him change, do we? But we know what to expect from him. And then happy, you could think of Tigger. He's always happy, or even Pooh is always pretty typically happy. And those of you that know a person like that, sometimes it's out of character when you see them a little sad. But anyway, so once again, we have 9 temperament traits, 5 different ways for our senses, and now we're adding 3 different types of mood. Can you see how we're not going to have the exact same behavior of everyone? It is going to be very different. In your handout, you'll see with the less positive, there are a lot of activities and ideas for children to see the positive, but you need to be very careful that you're not trying to change them. And you know, you might look at movies or characters like Eeyore, where you can say, you know, sometimes he does sometimes gets a little down, but isn't it Eeyore that always gives up his house? when it blows over, or it's okay, I lost my towel. So don't make that a negative, but help them see the positive, but also see their value. I hope that in this little time that we've been able to talk, is that you've got just a little bit of information about what temperament is. It's too hard to describe if you combine this temperament trait with this temperament trait. But if you do have questions or concerns, you can call us and we'll be glad to help you. That's what we're here for. Do remember that the temperament does affect how your child learns, plays, and makes friends, and also shows love. It doesn't predict exactly how your child would turn out. Again, we don't want to label children or tell them that this is what you're going to do when you get older, because it can be adapted. But it really predicts how a child might react, so you can then make what when I learned and didn't quite understand, help find the good fit for your child. What is the best fit for a child that needs a routine? How are we going to use that when we do know that we're going to be moving? How can we help that child adapt? Get to know your child's temperament, talk to them, structure their world so that the best that you can grow. And identifying areas will affect their friendships and other relationships. They'll be successful in school and being happy. And then you can learn to help them adapt so that they don't always feel like on the outside. Thanks for joining us today. Remember, the key word is happy. And you have it's smile. I've been saying last week's. Oh, it's smile. Dang it. Sorry. I hope if people choose happy, we're going to give it to them, right? I even see it right there on the board. It's written in English, and I still said happy. It's smile. So smile and fill out your form. You'll have till Friday to do that. This will be up indefinitely, but you'll be able to watch it till Friday at 3 o'clock and fill out your form. And then on Thursday, we'll be reading 3 different books and sharing that with you, that you can also join us. Thanks again to United Way of Utah County, PBS Utah, and Women United, and thanks for joining us.